The boy my mother called an angel became my worst nightmare in a single night. "If you tell Dad, you're next," he whispered while I felt my body being destroyed. But he didn't know that angels can also turn into demons when they need to survive. Hello, my dears. What a joy to be here talking with you today. I'm Meredith Blackwood, 73 years young. I was born in Whispering Pines, Vermont, but today I live in this peaceful little town of Crimson Valley, Arizona. It's a place that brings me peace, you know, with this pure desert air and these red rock formations that are a blessing from God every day. These days, I divide my time between tending to my little cactus garden behind the house and making my hand-stitched memory books that I sell at our town's craft fair. I started with these memory books after I retired as a teacher about 15 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. My granddaughter Wren asked for a special keepsake album, not like those mass-produced ones that fall apart easily. I made her a beautiful album with vintage papers I had collected, added details with lace and antique buttons. The little girl was so happy that all her friends wanted one too. Soon, their mothers started placing orders, and that's how this little work that gives me so much pleasure was born. My little corner here is simple but cozy. I have this porch with my succulent collection, the vintage glider where I like to sit during cool evenings while I drink my hibiscus tea. Inside the house, I set up a small room just for my crafting, with papers organized by texture, all types of binding materials, and my old letterpress that still works perfectly. That's where I spend most of my time, creating my memory books while listening to the radio playing the bluegrass music I love so much. Oh, and before I continue my story, I wanted to make a special request to those of you watching. Tell me in the comments, which town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Early morning with coffee, after lunch, or late in the evening? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you take a little time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Let me know, okay? And if you can, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. Today, I want to share with you a part of my life that not even my grandchildren know about. A story I've kept for many years because it hurts to remember, but that might help someone who's going through difficult times. Because, my dears, life wasn't always this peaceful view I see from my porch today. There was a time when the sky fell on my head, and I had to find strength where I didn't even know it existed. It's about family, about broken trust, and about how, sometimes, we need to transform ourselves to survive. I was born in Whispering Pines, a small town in northern Vermont, nestled in the Green Mountains along the banks of Moonstone Creek. Few people know it, but it's a place of unique beauty, with dense evergreen forests and waters that reflect the sky like a mirror. We were a simple, but very close family. My father, Garrett Blackwood, worked as an accountant at the town hall, a respected man everyone knew. He was thin, tall, always wore a tweed flat cap when he went out, and had a laugh that was a joy to hear. My mother, Viola Blackwood, was an elementary school teacher, one of those who taught all subjects to the little ones. A woman of medium height, hair always in a braided crown, warm hazel eyes, and hands that smelled of juniper because of the soap she loved to make. Our house was on Hemlock Lane, number 27, very close to the town square. It was an old construction, timber frame with river stone details, typical of the region which had seen settlement by Scottish and French-Canadian immigrants. It had a long hallway that led to 4 bedrooms, a spacious living room with a handcrafted maple sofa and cushions that my mother embroidered, a kitchen with a cast-iron wood stove where we gathered every night, and a backyard with sugar maples, wild blueberry bushes, and a small chicken coop. And how I loved that backyard. That's where I spent most of my time, climbing trees, taking care of the chickens, or playing with my 2 older brothers, Sullivan and Pierce. My childhood routine was quite simple. I woke up early with the rooster's crow, had tea with fresh milk, and homemade sourdough bread with maple butter that Mom made. Then I went to school, which was 4 blocks from home. I studied in the morning and returned for lunch, always hearty vegetable soup, some greens from the garden, and on good days, a small piece of venison. In the afternoon, after helping Mom wash the dishes, I could play. I played hide-and-seek, Red Rover, hopscotch, or house under the maple tree with my friends Zinnia and Temperance, who lived on the same street. We made our dolls from corn husks, dressed with fabric scraps that Mom kept from her sewing. Sundays were special days. We all went to service at Cedar Creek Church at the edge of town. Afterwards, the whole family gathered for lunch, which was always more elaborate, with roasted pheasant and that maple bread pudding that only my mother knew how to make. In the afternoon, when the chill set in, Dad would take us trout fishing at the creek, or we would receive visits from neighbors for tea with maple scones and conversation on the porch. It was a simple life, but a very happy one. But when I was 10 years old, our family changed forever. Mom had tried to have more children after me, but couldn't. There were 3 lost pregnancies, and each time she became sadder. I remember hearing her crying softly at night when she thought we were sleeping. That's when my parents decided to adopt a child. "We're going to give a home to a child who needs love," Mom would say, her eyes shining with hope. That's how Caleb came into our family. He was 8 years old when he came to live with us, 2 years younger than me. He was a skinny boy with copper hair and large, always alert amber eyes. At first he was shy, spoke little, and observed everything. Mom was patient, sitting with him for hours on the porch, telling stories, teaching him letters, making him feel part of our family. Gradually, Caleb opened up. He had a beautiful smile that lit up the whole house when it appeared. He loved helping Dad split firewood and had a special way with animals. And how well he carved! He made beautiful little wooden figurines that Mom proudly displayed on the mantelpiece. Everyone in town commented on how blessed we were to have received that boy into our family. "He seems like a little angel who fell from heaven," the ladies would say after church. At school, Caleb quickly stood out. He was intelligent, learned everything easily, and the teachers always praised him. I felt proud of my younger brother, and even Sullivan and Pierce, who were already teenagers, liked to teach him things. Our house became happier with his arrival, as if a constant ray of sunshine had entered through our windows. But around the age of 12, I began to notice subtle changes in Caleb. Sometimes he would disappear after school and arrive home with a strange smell on his clothes. When Mom asked where he had been, he gave vague answers or became irritated. "Leave me alone. I'm tired of you all watching me," he would say, and go up to his room slamming the door. Mom would look at Dad with concern, but he would say it was just a phase, that it would soon pass. On weekends, Caleb no longer wanted to fish or help with the firewood. He spent hours away from home with friends no one in the family knew. When he returned, his eyes were different, somewhat reddened, and he either laughed for no reason or stayed quiet in a corner, as if he were in another world. Mom started crying in secret again, and I heard my parents' worried conversations at night when they thought we were sleeping. "I think he's hanging out with that crowd by the abandoned mill," Dad would say. "Those boys who sell things that aren't good for young people." "My God, Garrett, what are we going to do? He's still just a boy," Mom would respond, her voice choked. And so, that boy who seemed like an angel when he arrived at our house gradually transformed. The sweet smile gave way to a defiant look, the gentle words were replaced by rude responses, and that light he brought with him faded, giving way to a shadow that grew day by day in our family. And none of us imagined how dark that shadow could become. When Caleb turned 14, things really started to change. It was no longer just a phase, as Dad said. That sweet boy who came to our house had transformed into an unrecognizable teenager. He started skipping classes, and the school principal, Mrs. Harlow, appeared at our house at least once a week. "Mr. Blackwood, Caleb hasn't been to school for 3 days," she would say worriedly. "We asked his classmates, and they said he's hanging out with that crowd by the abandoned mill." Moonstone Creek, which should have been a place of beauty and peace, as it was for most families in Whispering Pines, had become a meeting point for troubled youth near the old abandoned mill. The town, which was previously known only for its lush forests and the crystal-clear waters where we took our canoe rides on summer Sundays, now also had its dark corners, where they said drugs and moonshine were sold to minors. I remember as if it were today that night in June 1965. I was 16 years old and was helping Mom prepare dinner. She was making a venison stew with wild mushrooms, one of those that only she knew how to make, Dad's favorite. Caleb hadn't returned home since morning, and Mom looked out the window every 5 minutes, worried. "Meredith, it's getting dark, and your brother isn't back. I have a tightness in my chest, daughter." I tried to calm her, saying he must be at a friend's house, that he would soon return. But I also felt something strange, a bad feeling. It wasn't normal for him to miss dinner. As rebellious as he was, Caleb always showed up to eat. That's when we heard a loud noise at the front door. It wasn't a normal knock. It sounded like someone had thrown themselves against it. Mom ran to see what it was, and I followed right behind. When we opened the door, Caleb almost fell into the house. He was staggering, with red eyes and a strong smell of moonshine and something burnt on his clothes. "My son, what happened to you?" Mom asked, frightened, holding him by the shoulders. Caleb pushed her hard, making her hit the wall. "Let go of me, you old nag. I'm tired of you controlling me." I'll never forget the look of shock on my mother's face. It was as if she had been slapped, but much worse. The son she loved so much, whom she had chosen to be part of our family, was treating her as if she were a stranger, an enemy. "Caleb, apologize to Mom right now," I shouted, seized by a courage I didn't know I had. He turned to me with a look that froze my soul. It was no longer my little brother's look. It was the look of a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. "Shut up, you idiot. You don't tell me what to do." "Nobody does." He went upstairs, stomping his feet, and locked himself in his room. Mom was crying silently, leaning against the wall. I went to her and hugged her. "Let's call Dad, Mom. He needs to come home early today." Dad was working the night shift at the town hall, doing overtime to buy a new transistor radio that Caleb wanted so badly. Irony of fate. That night was just the beginning. In the months that followed, Caleb got worse. He started disappearing for entire days, returning with money we didn't know where it came from. And several times Sheriff Thaddeus knocked on our door to warn that he had been seen with the gang that robbed vacation cabins by the creek. Dad tried everything. Talks, punishments. He even sought Reverend Lockhart for counseling. Nothing helped. It was as if something had taken over Caleb, as if the good boy we knew had completely disappeared. One Sunday morning, after church, we were all having tea in the kitchen when Dad tried once more to talk to him. "Son, we love you very much. You know that, don't you? We just want to help you. Please, let us help you." Caleb's response was a mocking laugh. "Help? You never helped me with anything. You brought me to this crappy family just to feel good about yourselves, to show everyone how good you are. Look, we adopted an orphan. We're so charitable." "That's not true, my son," Mom said, her voice choked. "We chose you because we loved you from the first moment." "Lie. You never really loved me. I was always the different one, the poor little thing." "Well, now I'm not a poor little thing anymore. I have my own friends, my own life." "What kind of friends teach you to steal and do drugs?" Dad asked, losing patience. "Real friends, people who accept me as I am, not like you, who want to turn me into a perfect little doll like that idiot Meredith." That was too much for Mom. She stood up, trembling, but with a firmness in her voice that I had rarely heard. "Caleb Blackwood, you will not speak like that in my house anymore. As long as you live under this roof, you will respect your family. I'm tired of crying every night, tired of seeing your father killing himself, working to give you everything you ask for, only to be treated like this. Either you change this behavior, or we will have to take more serious measures." It was the first time I saw Mom confront Caleb that way. For a moment, I thought he would realize the harm he was causing, that he would apologize. But what happened next changed our lives forever. Caleb jumped up, knocking over his chair. His face was red with anger, his fists clenched. "You're not my real mother to talk to me like that. My real mother abandoned me, and now I know why. Because nobody can really love me. Not her, not you, nobody." He punched the table so hard that the cups jumped, and one of them broke. Then he left, slamming the door with such force that the framed family photo fell off the wall. The three of us remained paralyzed, looking at the closed door. Sullivan and Pierce, my older brothers, no longer lived at home. Sullivan had gotten married and moved to Burlington, and Pierce was studying in Boston. It was just the three of us against the storm that Caleb had become. "He'll come back when he calms down," Dad said, trying to console us. But there was a concern in his eyes that he couldn't hide. Caleb didn't return that day, nor the next. On the third day, when we were already thinking of looking for the police, he appeared at home late at night. He was calmer, even apologized to Mom in an awkward way. He said he had stayed at a friend's house, that he needed time to think. Mom, with that huge heart, hugged him and said it was okay, that the important thing was that he was home. For a few weeks, things seemed to improve a bit. Caleb returned to school, arrived home at the agreed time, even helped Dad split firewood sometimes. But I noticed that something still wasn't right. Sometimes I caught him looking at Mom with a strange, almost frightening look, and when she turned her back, he went back to being the polite boy as always. It was as if he was playing a role, waiting for something. It was during this time that I started locking my bedroom door at night. I couldn't explain why, but something told me I wasn't safe. There were moments when I felt Caleb watching me when I wasn't looking, in a way that gave me chills. But I didn't tell anyone. After all, he was my brother, and Mom had already suffered so much that I didn't want to worry her even more. What I didn't know was that this apparent calm was just the quiet before the storm. A storm that would destroy our family in a way I could never have imagined. It was October 1965, and it had been very cold that day. Dad had left for a work trip. He needed to go to Montpelier for a meeting with accountants from other town halls in the region. He would be gone for 2 days. "Take care," he said before leaving, giving Mom a kiss on the forehead and me a hug. For Caleb, a nod and a "behave yourself, son." Things between them had become so difficult that even gestures of affection had become rare. That afternoon, I was helping Mom make maple syrup with the sap we had collected from our trees. It was a tradition in Whispering Pines, especially in October when the sugar maples were ready. The sweet smell filled the whole house, and normally it was a happy time of laughter and stories. But that day, there was a tension in the air that we couldn't explain. "Meredith, have you seen your brother today?" Mom asked as she stirred the pot of maple syrup. "He left early, even before breakfast. Said he was going to meet some friends." Mom sighed, stirring the bubbling syrup more slowly. "I've been having bad dreams, daughter. I dream of murky water, of doors I can't open. My grandmother used to say that was an omen." "That's silly, Mom. They're just dreams," I replied, trying to calm her. But deep down, I also felt something strange, as if the air had become heavier. We finished the maple syrup late in the afternoon. Mom filled some small glass jars and left the rest cooling in the pot. "I'll save one for your father. He loves it," she said with a sad smile. Then she went to lie down a bit, complaining of a headache. I stayed in the kitchen cleaning up the mess. When I finished, I went to my room to study. I had a math test the next day and wanted to be well prepared. Time passed, and when I realized, it was already getting dark. I went downstairs to turn on the lights and check if Mom was okay. The house was strangely silent. I called for her but got no response. I went to her room, but she wasn't there. I went back to the kitchen. Maybe she had gone out to the yard. That's when I heard a loud noise coming from the living room, as if something had fallen. "Mom?" I called, walking slowly toward the living room. What I saw when I entered makes me tremble to this day. Mom was lying on the floor, blood flowing from her head, forming a dark pool on the light rug she loved so much. And over her, with an expression I will never forget, was Caleb. In his hand, our carved wooden lamp now broken and stained red. "What did you do?" I screamed, running toward Mom. Caleb looked at me, as if only now realizing I was there. His eyes were glazed, his pupils so dilated that you could barely see the color of his eyes. His body trembled slightly, and there was a strong smell of moonshine and something else that at the time I didn't recognize. But today I know was drugs. She wouldn't stop talking. Talking, saying I was destroying the family, that I was a disappointment, he muttered, looking at the lamp in his hand as if he didn't understand how it had gotten there. I knelt beside Mom, terrified. I couldn't feel her breathing. There was so much blood that my hands and my dress soon became soaked. "We need to call a doctor, quick!" I shouted at Caleb. That's when I saw the change in his eyes, as if something had clicked inside him. A look I had never seen before, not even in the worst days. An empty look, but at the same time full of a terrible intention. "Nobody is going to call anyone," he said with a strangely calm voice. "She's already dead anyway." "No, it can't be," I sobbed, feeling a despair that seemed to tear me apart inside. I tried to get up to run to the neighbor's house, Mrs. Abernathy, who had a telephone, but Caleb was faster. He grabbed my arm with such force that it left purple marks. "You're not going anywhere," he said, pulling me away from Mom. "Nobody can know what happened here." "Let me go. We need to help Mom," I screamed, trying to break free. I felt such a hard slap on my face that I saw stars. I fell to the floor, dazed. Caleb dragged me by my hair to the sofa and threw me there. "Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you," he said through clenched teeth, his face so close to mine that I could smell his sour breath. "Your mother fell. She was cleaning the chandelier, slipped off the ladder and hit her head. It was an accident. Understand? An accident." "But that's not what happened," I cried. You killed her." Another slap, harder than the first. I tasted the metallic flavor of blood in my mouth. "If you tell another story to anyone at all, the same thing that happened to her will happen to you. And then to your father. Do you understand?" I nodded, trembling with fear and pain. He let me go and started walking back and forth, running his hands through his dirty hair. "We need to fix this place up before anyone shows up," he said, more to himself than to me. He went to get a ladder from the service area and placed it next to the chandelier in the living room. Then he forced me to help him clean the blood from the floor. I was crying so much I could barely see what I was doing. My mother, my dear mother, was dead there on the floor, and I was helping her murderer cover up the crime. When we finished cleaning, he held me by the shoulders. "Now we're going to take her to the bedroom. We'll say she wasn't feeling well, went to bed early, and we found her like this in the morning. Understand?" I couldn't answer. He shook me hard. "Understand?" "Yes," I answered, almost voiceless. We carried Mom to the bed. It was a heavy, inert body. Caleb placed her lying down, arranged her hair to hide the wound on her head, and covered her with the sheet up to her neck, as if she were sleeping. Looking at her like this, it really seemed as if she was just resting, if it weren't for the paleness and the blood stain that was beginning to appear on the white pillow. "Now go take a shower and change clothes," he ordered, "and throw away that dress. It's all covered in blood." I went to the bathroom like an automaton. I couldn't think. I couldn't feel. It was as if my soul had left my body and I was watching everything from the outside. I let the hot water run over me, washing away my mother's blood, while silent tears ran down my face. I wanted to scream, but I knew I couldn't. I wanted to run, but where to? When I came out of the shower, dressed in a clean nightgown, Caleb was waiting for me in the hallway. His look had changed again. It was no longer the anger or emptiness of before. It was something different, something that made me freeze inside. "Now it's just you and me," he said, approaching. "And you're going to do exactly what I tell you." What happened in the following hours is so painful that even after so many years, I have difficulty putting it into words. Caleb took me to my room and locked the door. That night, The brother I once loved used not only my body, but my soul. He used me as if I were trash, while I cried silently, my face buried in the pillow, wishing it would end, wishing I would die. "If you tell anyone, your father will be next," he whispered in my ear before leaving the room, already in the early morning. "And you know I'm capable of it." I lay there, unable to move, feeling pains I never imagined existed. Physical, yes, but mainly those of the soul. My mother was dead. I had been violated by my own brother, and I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't seek help. I couldn't even cry out loud. I spent the night awake, listening to Caleb's snores in the room next door, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just destroyed our family forever. I thought about running away, but where would I go? Who would believe me? And what if he carried out the threat and killed my father, too? The next morning, Caleb woke me up early. His eyes were red and his face swollen, as if he had been crying. But I knew it was a hangover. Remember what we agreed on? It was an accident. Mom fell off the ladder while cleaning the chandelier. "You understood well?" I nodded, unable to look at him. "Now get up and get ready. We have to tell the neighbors, and you have to look normal, understand? No strange looks or crying too much. It was a sad accident, but it was just an accident." I obeyed like a rag doll, without a life of my own. I got dressed, tried to fix my hair, but my hands were shaking so much that I gave up. Caleb watched me all the time, like a vulture, ready to attack me at the slightest sign of disobedience. We went to Mrs. Abernathy's house, our neighbor. Caleb told the story of the accident with a conviction that frightened me. He cried at the right moment, hugged me like a protective brother in front of the neighbor. A perfect performance. Soon the news spread throughout the small whispering pines. The neighbors came, the town doctor, Dr. Emmett, came to examine Mom and sign the death certificate. "Cranial trauma due to accidental fall," he wrote, without suspecting anything. Someone called Burlington, notifying Sullivan. Another person managed to get a message to Dad in Montpelier. The house soon filled with people, with whispered voices, with looks of pity. And in the midst of all this, I, like a shadow, observing the world moving forward while mine had stopped forever on that fateful night. Caleb continued his impeccable performance. The grieving son, the protective brother. He received condolences, thanked the neighbors for the food they brought, organized the preparations for the wake. No one, absolutely no one, suspected the monster behind that mask of mourning. And me? I was trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. A nightmare that would continue the following night, and the next, until my father's return. Because Caleb, as if it weren't enough to have taken my mother and my innocence, returned to my room the next 2 nights. And each time he opened that door, a part of me died a little more. Dad would arrive at the end of that day. The house was clean. Mom's wake had already taken place, and the burial would be the next morning. I was sitting on the porch, staring at nothing, when Caleb approached. My entire body stiffened, like a cornered animal that senses the predator nearby. "Dad arrives today," he said, sitting next to me, too close. "You remember well what you're going to say, don't you?" I nodded in silence. In those 3 days, I had learned that the less I spoke, the less attention I would draw from him. "Look at me when I'm talking," he ordered, grabbing my chin firmly. "If you open your mouth, if you tell anything different from what we agreed, the next one to have an accident will be him, understand?" His eyes were cloudy, as they always got when he used those strange cigarettes or took the pills he hid in the bottom of the drawer. But there was also a terrifying lucidity there, a calculated cruelty that told me he would fulfill every word of his threats. "I won't say anything," I replied, my voice almost inaudible. He smiled, a smile that had no joy, only satisfaction with the power he exercised over me. "Good girl. Now go get ready, put on a clean dress. You have to look presentable when Dad arrives." Like an automaton, I went to my room and put on the black dress that Mom had made for me the previous Christmas. It was the first time I was wearing it. Mom would never see me in it. This thought made my eyes fill with tears again, but I wiped them quickly. I couldn't cry. I had to look normal. The afternoon dragged on as if each minute lasted an eternity. The neighbors continued coming, bringing food, words of comfort that meant nothing to me. Caleb received them, always attentive, always playing the role of the grieving son, the protective brother, and everyone believed. No one saw the monster behind that mask of mourning. When the town hall car stopped in front of our house, bringing Dad back, I felt my heart race. Part of me wanted to run to him, tell him everything, beg for protection. But the other part, the one that had been broken in those days, knew that this would be a death sentence for him. Dad got out of the car with a devastated face. Someone had managed to notify him in Montpellier, and he returned as fast as he could. His eyes sought mine as soon as he entered the house, and what I saw in them broke my heart once more. A deep pain, a confusion, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. "Meredith," he murmured, opening his arms. I ran to him and hugged him with all the strength I had. I wanted to stay there forever, protected, safe. But over his shoulder, I saw Caleb watching us, his cold eyes reminding me of our agreements. "Dad, I'm so sorry," I cried, and for the first time since the incident, the tears came genuine, uncontrollable. "What happened, daughter? How? Why?" He couldn't form complete sentences. The pain was too great. Before I could answer, Caleb approached, putting his hand on my shoulder with enough force to hurt me, but in a way that seemed like just a gesture of comfort in Dad's eyes. "It was a terrible accident, Dad," he said, his voice choked. "Mom was cleaning the chandelier, used the old ladder and fell. She hit her head. When we found her..." Dad fell to his knees, sobbing like a child. Caleb knelt beside him, hugging him, while looking at me over Dad's shoulder. A look that clearly said, "See how it's done?" That night was the longest of my life. Dad couldn't stop crying. The neighbors took turns staying with us, but eventually they left, leaving only our shattered family. A father destroyed by pain, a daughter trapped in a nightmare, and the monster who had caused it all. When I finally went to my room late at night, I locked the door and pushed the dresser against it. I couldn't stand another night in Caleb's hands. I'd rather die. But even so, I stayed awake all night, sitting on the bed, hugging my knees, trembling at every noise in the hallway, imagining that at any moment he could knock down the door. The burial the next day was like a blur in my memory. So many people, so many empty words of comfort. Dad looked like a ghost, pale, his eyes red from so much crying. Caleb continued his theater, receiving condolences, thanking everyone for their presence. And I was there, standing next to my mother's coffin, unable to say goodbye, unable to process that I would never hear her voice again, feel her embrace. In the days that followed, a dark routine set in at our house. Dad could barely get out of bed. Caleb took control of everything. He paid the bills, did the shopping, cooked. In everyone's eyes, he was the perfect son, taking care of the family in such a difficult time. No one knew that he came to my room every night, that I had to keep the dresser against the door and pretend I was sleeping so that he would give up after knocking a few times. 2 weeks after the burial, I noticed that Caleb was getting increasingly irritated with my refusals. His knocking on my bedroom door was getting louder, his whispered threats at breakfast more intense. I knew I couldn't maintain that resistance for long. He would eventually find a way to get in, or worse, he might take out his frustration on Dad, who was so fragile that anything could break him completely. It was on one of those nights, while I listened to Caleb pound on my door once more, that something inside me snapped. It wasn't just fear I felt now, it was anger, an anger so intense, so primitive, that it almost scared me. How dare he do this to our family? How dare he destroy everything Mom had built with so much love? "You will pay for this," I whispered to myself, tears running down my face no longer from fear or sadness, but from a cold fury that was beginning to take over me. I swear on my mother's soul that you will pay. That night, I didn't sleep. But instead of being paralyzed by terror, I began to plan. I needed to be smart. I needed to be smarter than Caleb. Because if I tried to confront him directly, I knew I would lose. He was stronger, more cruel. My only chance was to use the intelligence that Mom always said I had. The next morning, when I went down for breakfast, something in my behavior must have changed because Caleb looked at me differently, almost curiously. "Good morning," he said, watching me with those eyes that always seemed to be calculating something. "Good morning," I replied, serving myself coffee. My voice was calm, controlled. It was no longer the voice of the terrified victim of the last few days. He frowned, probably sensing the change, but didn't say anything. Dad entered the kitchen at that moment, his eyes swollen, his face unshaven. He had lost so much weight in just 2 weeks that his clothes looked like they were hanging on a hanger. "Good morning, Dad," I said, trying to smile. I needed to look normal. I couldn't let Caleb suspect anything. "Morning," Dad mumbled, sitting down heavily. "I made fresh coffee and there's bread that I baked myself," I said, placing the cup in front of him. It was the first time I had actually done something in the kitchen since that night. Before, Caleb did everything, maintaining absolute control of the house. Dad looked at me with a confused expression, then at the cup, as if he didn't understand what it was. "You need to eat, Dad," I gently insisted. "Mom would be sad to see you like this." At the mention of Mom, I saw his eyes fill with tears, but he took the cup and took a small sip, as if he wanted to please me. "You're different today," Caleb commented when Dad left the kitchen, taking the coffee he barely touched to his room. I shrugged. "Life goes on, doesn't it? We can't stay in the dark forever." He studied me for a long moment, as if trying to decipher if there was any trap in my words. Finally, he smiled that cold smile I hated so much. "I'm glad you're understanding how things are now," he said, leaning in close to me. "Maybe you don't need to lock your bedroom door at night anymore." I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to move away. "Maybe not," I replied, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. This small exchange changed something in the dynamic between us. Caleb seemed to think he had completely broken me, that I had finally accepted my place in the twisted world he had created. And this false sense of victory made him lower his guard, if only slightly. In the days that followed, I began to observe him carefully, learning his habits, his moments of weakness. I noticed how he always took those strange pills with coffee after lunch, how he became lethargic for about half an hour afterward before the effect really began, how he kept more of these pills in a small tin hidden under the mattress. I saw him taking them once when he thought I was in the backyard. I also began to get closer to Dad, trying to pull him out of that almost catatonic state. I brought him food in his room, told old stories, those that Mom liked to remember on Sundays after lunch. Gradually, I saw a small spark returning to his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Caleb observed this closeness with suspicion at first, but soon came to see it as further proof that I had accepted the new reality. After all, if I were planning something, why would I care about Dad's well-being? A week after that conversation in the kitchen, I felt it was time. I couldn't wait any longer. Each day in that house was like living in a powder keg about to explode. And if I didn't do something soon, I feared that Caleb might change his mind about keeping Dad alive. I waited for the right moment. It was a Wednesday. Dad had gone to the doctor in town, his first outing since the burial. Caleb was restless, pacing back and forth, smoking one of those cigarettes that made him strange. "Want me to make some coffee?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "You seem nervous." He looked at me, surprised by the offer. Normally, I did everything I could to stay away from him when we were alone in the house. "Maybe," he replied, still suspicious. I went to the kitchen, my heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. I took the strongest coffee we had, the one Dad kept for special occasions. While the water was heating, I took the pills I had stolen from Caleb's tin the night before when he was in the bath, out of my dress pocket. I didn't know exactly what they were, but I had seen the effect they had on him. If one or two left him in that lethargic state before the euphoria, what would happen if he took several? My hand trembled as I crushed the 6 pills in the mortar that Mom used for spices, turning them into a fine powder that I mixed into the coffee. "You're taking too long," Caleb shouted from the living room. "Coming," I replied, pouring the coffee into the cup. I added plenty of sugar to disguise any strange taste and took it to him. Caleb took the cup, looking at me intently, as if searching for some sign of betrayal. He took a small sip, then another. "It's good," he said, surprised. "You made it differently." "I used Dad's special coffee. I thought you deserved it," I replied, forcing a smile. He smiled back, that smile that never reached his eyes, and continued drinking. I sat in the armchair across from him, pretending to read a magazine, but watching him over the pages. Gradually, I saw the effects begin. First, he became more relaxed, sinking into the sofa. Then his eyes began to get heavy, and he blinked slowly, as if fighting sleep. "What strange coffee," he mumbled, his voice already slurred. "What did you—" He didn't finish the sentence. His head tilted to the side, and the cup slipped from his hand, spilling the rest of the coffee on the rug. The same rug where my mother's blood had formed a pool on that horrible night. I got up slowly, my heart still racing, and approached him. Caleb was unconscious, his breathing heavy and irregular. For a moment, I felt a pang of fear. What if I had overdosed him? What if he died? But I soon pushed that thought away. After what he did, it would only be justice. I didn't have much time. Dad would return from the doctor soon, and I needed to be ready. I ran to Caleb's room and started going through his things. I found more of those pills in the tin under the mattress, a small bag with a white powder hidden inside a sock at the bottom of the drawer, and a small gun wrapped in an old shirt. I took everything and carried it to the living room, placing it beside him on the sofa. Then I went to the phone and dialed the sheriff's office. "Whispering Pines. Sheriff's office. Sheriff Thaddeus speaking," answered the hoarse voice on the other end of the line. "Sheriff, this is Meredith Blackwood," I spoke, my voice trembling, but determined. "I need you to come to my house urgently. It's about my mother's death. It wasn't an accident." Sheriff Thaddeus arrived in less than 15 minutes. When I opened the door, I saw that he had also brought Deputy Silas, a burly man with a thick mustache who commanded respect. The two looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Where is your brother, girl?" asked the sheriff, removing his hat as he entered. "In the living room," I replied, leading them. "He's unconscious." When we entered, Caleb was still passed out on the sofa, breathing heavily, with the drugs and the gun exposed at his side. The sheriff looked at that scene and frowned. "What happened here?" I took a deep breath. It was time for the truth. A truth that had been trapped inside me like a corrosive poison for almost 3 weeks. "My mother didn't die in an accident," I began, feeling the words leave my throat like stones. "Caleb killed her. I saw everything." The sheriff and the deputy exchanged grave looks. The sheriff gestured for me to continue. With a trembling but determined voice, I told everything. How Caleb had arrived drugged that night, how he argued with Mom, how he hit her with the lamp. I told how he forced me to help him cover up the crime, how he threatened me and my father. And finally, with tears streaming down my face, I told about the acts I suffered on the following nights. Deputy Silas visibly paled during my account, his hand instinctively going to the gun on his belt when I mentioned those disgusting acts. Sheriff Thaddeus, on the other hand, remained impassive, but his eyes revealed contained fury. "Why didn't you say anything before, girl?" he asked when I finished. "He threatened to kill my father if I told," I replied, wiping the tears with the sleeve of my dress. "I knew he would be capable. After what I saw, I was sure he wouldn't hesitate." At that moment, Caleb began to move on the sofa, mumbling something unintelligible. Deputy Silas quickly positioned himself over him, handcuffs in hand. "And how did he get in this state?" asked the sheriff, observing Caleb with contempt. I told about the coffee with the pills. I didn't lie. I had nothing more to hide. If this brought me problems, so be it. I couldn't stand living in that hell anymore. To my surprise, the sheriff just nodded. "Self-defense," he muttered, more to himself than to me. Any judge would understand. Caleb woke up completely when Deputy Silas put the handcuffs on his wrists. His eyes, still cloudy from the drugs, widened when he saw the police officers, then fixed on me with such intense hatred that it made me step back. "You treacherous bitch!" he roared, trying to get up, but the deputy kept him firmly pressed against the sofa. "You'll pay for this! I'll kill you! I'll kill your father!" "Shut your mouth, boy," ordered Sheriff Thaddeus, his voice cutting through the air like a whip. "You're under arrest for the murder of Viola Blackwood and the assault of Meredith Blackwood. Everything you say can and will be used against you in court." Caleb continued screaming threats as they dragged him out of the house, but his words no longer affected me like before. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without feeling that oppression in my chest. Deputy Silas took Caleb to the patrol car, while the sheriff stayed with me. "We'll need an official statement at the station," he said, his voice now softer. "And you'll need to undergo a medical examination." I nodded, feeling a blush of shame rise to my face, but I knew it was necessary. "And my father?" I asked. "How am I going to tell him?" The sheriff put his hand on my shoulder, a paternal gesture that painfully reminded me of Mom. "Do you want me to be here when he arrives? I can help explain." "Please," I replied, grateful for the offer. We didn't wait long. Soon we heard the car stop in front of the house, and Dad entered, stopping abruptly when he saw Sheriff Thaddeus in the living room. "What happened?" he asked, his face pale with concern. "Where is Caleb?" The sheriff gestured for him to sit down, and Dad obeyed, looking even older and more fragile under the afternoon light coming through the windows. "Mr. Blackwood," the sheriff began, "I have difficult news. Your daughter has told us the truth about Mrs. Viola's death." I saw Dad's face contort in confusion. "The truth? But it was an accident. She fell from the ladder." "No, Dad," I intervened, sitting next to him and holding his hands. "It wasn't an accident. Caleb, he—" The words got stuck in my throat. How do you tell a father that his adopted son, the one he welcomed with so much love, had murdered his wife and abused his daughter? Sheriff Thaddeus noticed my difficulty and took over the narrative, explaining in direct but respectful words what had really happened on that fateful night and in the days that followed. Dad listened to everything in silence, his face a mask of growing horror. When the sheriff finished, he turned to me, his eyes welling up. "Is it true, daughter? All of this?" I nodded, unable to speak, tears returning with full force. Dad pulled me into a hug so tight it almost hurt, but it was a welcome pain. It was the protective hug I so badly needed in the past weeks. My daughter. My girl. How could I not notice? How did I let this happen? He sobbed, holding my face between his trembling hands. Forgive me, daughter. Forgive your father for not protecting you. It wasn't your fault, Dad, I replied through tears. He fooled all of us, right to the end. The sheriff gave us a few moments, then explained that he would need to take me to the station for the official statement and to the medical clinic for the examinations. Dad insisted on coming along, of course. He wouldn't leave my side even for a second from that moment on. The following hours were a blur of statements, humiliating examinations, and more tears. But there was a fundamental difference. Now I was no longer alone. Dad was by my side, holding my hand when the procedures allowed, waiting patiently outside when they didn't. I learned later that Sullivan and Pierce were also called to the station to testify about Caleb's behavior in recent times. Both confirmed the changes they had noticed, how he had become aggressive and unstable. I must have felt something was wrong, Sullivan told the sheriff, because I had been thinking about visiting you, but with work and the new baby, I feel so guilty now. Pierce, always more quiet and observant, revealed that he had seen Caleb with the crowd from the abandoned mill once when he came to spend a weekend at home. They were smoking something strange and exchanging small packages. I told him to stay away from those people, but he laughed in my face and said I didn't tell him what to do. The investigation was quick. The evidence was compelling. Besides my testimony, there was the medical report that proved the abuse, the drugs found with Caleb, and the forensic examination done at our house, which found traces of blood on the living room rug, even after our attempts to clean it. The gun found in Caleb's room also linked him to a series of robberies at vacation cabins in the region. Apparently, Caleb was part of a gang that had been terrorizing tourists for months. The trial took place 3 months later. It was a difficult period, but of slow recovery. Dad and I temporarily moved to Sullivan's house in Burlington. We couldn't stay in that house in Whispering Pines anymore, where every corner reminded us of what we had lost and the horror we had lived through. I didn't need to testify in person at the court, thanks to the efforts of the prosecutor, Mr. Archibald, who argued that this would be a second victimization. My recorded testimony at the station was considered sufficient. Caleb was convicted of first-degree murder, rape, and criminal association. He received a sentence of 30 years without the right to appeal. The last time I saw him was the day he was taken from the county jail to the state prison in Windsor. He looked at me with those eyes empty of humanity and said, "This isn't over, Meredith. One day I'll be back." But his words no longer had power over me. I was free of him finally. It took us more than a year to begin rebuilding our lives. Dad never fully recovered. How could he? He lost the wife he loved and discovered that the son he had welcomed into his home was a monster. But gradually, he found small reasons to continue. His work at the town hall, the birth of Sullivan's second child, my progress at school. As for me, I had nightmares almost every night. I would wake up screaming, in a cold sweat, believing that Caleb was in the room. Dad would come running, hug me until I stopped shaking, murmuring words of comfort that slowly began to make sense. Dr. Oswald, the family doctor for years, recommended that I talk with Mrs. Theodora, a lady who helped people with problems of the soul, as he delicately put it. Today, I understand that she was what they would call a therapist. But at that time, in a small town in the interior, these things didn't have a name. Mrs. Theodora received me in her wooden house on the outskirts of Burlington with a cup of chamomile tea and infinite patience. She was the first person I could really talk to about everything that had happened, without fear of judgment or pity. "What happened to you is not who you are," she told me in one of our meetings. "It's something that happened to you, not something that you are." Those words were like a seed planted in barren soil. It took time to germinate, but when it finally sprouted, it changed everything. Gradually, with the help of Mrs. Theodora, Dad, my brothers, and a few friends who didn't drift away after the scandal, I began to rebuild myself. I wasn't the same Meredith as before. That innocent girl had died on that October night. But the new Meredith who emerged from the ashes was stronger, more resilient. In 1967, 2 years after the tragedy, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I no longer wanted to live in Burlington, where, despite the city being larger than Whispering Pines, we were still known as the family from that case. I wanted a true fresh start in a place where no one knew our history, where we could be just another family. "I want to go to Arizona, Dad," I announced during dinner. "A school friend told me about Crimson Valley. It's a beautiful place, with red rock formations, canyons, clean air. We can start over there." Dad looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "If that's what you want, daughter, then that's where we'll go." We sold our house in Whispering Pines, gathered our few savings, and set off for the southwest of the United States for a new life that, at that moment, was just a distant promise of peace. Today, here in Crimson Valley, Arizona, at 73 years of age, I look out the window of my simple little house and see a sunset painting the red rock formations that embrace our town in orange and scarlet. It's a view that never tires me, even after so many years living here. This town welcomed us, me and my father, when we most needed a fresh start. We arrived here in 1967, me at 18 years old, and Dad at 48, both carrying wounds that time had not yet healed. At first, we settled in a small rented house near Desert Bloom Plaza. Dad soon got a job as an accountant at the town hall, thanks to his experience, and I started giving private lessons to neighborhood children. Local crafts are one of the references in the town, with several artisans who arrived or were born here and grew and lived from crafts, and that inspired me to learn. A lady, Mrs. Zipporah, taught me to do typical embroidery of the region, and that's how I began my journey as an artisan. Over time, I trained as a teacher and worked at the local elementary school for more than 30 years. I taught generations of Crimson Valley children to read and write, always with the care and patience that Mom had taught me. It was a job that brought healing to my wounded soul. Each child's smile, each little eye shining when discovering the world of letters, was like a small patch on my broken heart. Dad lived with us until 1992, when he left to join Mom. In his last years, he started smiling again. He made friends, fished in the Red Canyon River with some gentlemen from the town, attended church. Crimson Valley, with its exuberant nature and welcoming people, was a balm for both of us. After I retired 15 years ago, I dedicated myself completely to crafts. My memory books became known in the region. I use vintage papers, lace, and antique buttons to create each one, with their cheerful covers and carefully designed pages. I sell them at the fair that happens in the square on weekends, where many tourists who visit the canyons and the national park stop to buy souvenirs. My life today is peaceful and blessed. I have my own little house, a small 2-story adobe and wood with a porch where I put my glider on hot afternoons. In the back, I maintain a garden with herbs, vegetables, and some medicinal plants, like the hibiscus I use to make tea every night before sleeping. I have good friends here. Mrs. Esther, my neighbor for more than 40 years, has coffee with me almost every morning. Mr. Hiram, the retired barber, always stops by for a little chat in the late afternoon. And the neighborhood children call me Grandma Meredith, even those who aren't my real grandchildren. The region's cuisine is strongly influenced by Native American traditions and Southwestern culture, something I learned to appreciate over time. I like to prepare blue corn enchiladas on special occasions, and my prickly pear cookies are famous among the neighbors. My nephews, Sullivan and Pierce's children, visit me regularly, bringing the little ones to spend the July vacations here when the summer festival happens. It's a joy to see the house full, to hear children's laughter running through the yard, like in the times when our family was still whole. I married once to Nathaniel, a history teacher I met at the school where we worked. It was 10 happy years, but he left early, victim of a heart attack. We didn't have children, but his nephews also consider me as a grandmother, which fills me with joy. The scars of the past are still here. I won't deny it. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, remembering those terrible days. But I've learned to live with these memories. They don't define who I am. They're just part of my story. The pain that I once thought would destroy me ended up making me stronger, more compassionate. I discovered that life, even after the worst storms, finds a way to bloom again. Like the desert flowers that are reborn more vibrant after the fire, my soul found its own way to be reborn here, in this little piece of paradise called Crimson Valley. My dear ones who have accompanied me this far, with an open heart, I want to leave a message for you who may be going through something difficult, or know someone who is living in a situation similar to what I lived through. If you are suffering any type of abuse, be it physical, emotional, or psychological, know that you don't deserve it. No one deserves it. No matter what they tell you, no matter how they try to make you feel guilty, you deserve respect, care, and safety. And above all, you have the right to seek help. I know it may seem impossible to get out of such a situation. Fear paralyzes, threats terrorize, shame silences. I understood this firsthand. When you're in the middle of the storm, it's hard to believe that the sun will shine again. But it will, my dear. It will shine again. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our ability to start over each day. Even when it seems there's no way out, there's always a path we just can't see yet. That's how it was for me. In the darkest moments, when I thought there was no reason to continue, I found within me a strength I didn't know existed. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. I went through things I thought would completely destroy me. But I'm here, telling my story, in the hope that it might help someone. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. Even when they try to diminish us, break us, make us feel worthless, that light remains there, waiting to shine again. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen, even when they tried to take everything from me. That's what saved me, remembering, even in the worst moments, that I was still me, that I still had value, that I deserved a better life. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. It's precisely when we think we've reached our limit that we discover we can take one more step, and one more, and yet another. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. The scars remain. Sometimes they hurt when the weather changes, when something touches them, but we learn to live with them. They become part of us, but they don't define us. My story is not about what they did to me, but about how I chose to respond. Each day is a choice. Let the past consume me or use it as fuel to build something better. I chose the second option, and that's what I wish for you too. In any country, in any culture, seek help. Look for local authorities, protection organizations, trusted people. Today, there are many resources available for those who experience situations of abuse, much more than in my time. Don't suffer in silence. Your voice matters. Your life matters. Look around you. Learn to recognize the signs of abuse, isolation, excessive control, humiliation, threats. If you see this happening to someone close, extend your hand. Sometimes, all a person needs is to know they're not alone, that someone cares, that there's a way out. The community has a fundamental role in these situations. Family members, friends, neighbors, co-workers. We can all make a difference in the life of someone who is suffering. Don't close your eyes. Don't pretend you didn't see. Offer help, even if it's just listening without judging. And if you've been through something similar to what I went through and managed to survive, share your story too. It doesn't have to be for the whole world. It can be just for one person you know needs to hear it. Stories of overcoming are like seeds. We plant them without knowing exactly what fruits they will bear, but trusting that something good will grow from there. My dear ones in my heart, if you know someone who is trapped in a cycle of domestic violence or any type of abuse, share this video immediately. Every minute counts when living in hell. Your actions can save a life today, right now. Don't wait until tomorrow, because for many victims, tomorrow may not come. Click subscribe and turn on the notification bell so these messages of hope can reach those who need them most. Tell me in the comments if you've ever helped someone get out of an abusive situation or if you yourself managed to escape. Your words could be the light someone is looking for. Do this now, don't wait another minute. Because, my dears, what I never told anyone until today is that I admit I thought about committing extremely harmful acts against my body. I was a mentally very weak person, and that made me suffer for things that were out of my control. That's why I want everyone who has watched me until now to comment in the comments with the following word: strength. Thank you to everyone who has watched me until here. Kisses.